So, hello everybody. It's the Housing Law Podcast, 16th September 2022, and it's me, William Flack, and Daniel Bacon. Hi, Daniel.
Hi, good evening.
How's it going there?
Yeah, very well, very well. Just been really busy at work as always, and court duty, of course. That's been good. How have you been?
I've been okay. Over the summer, I got a lot of work done, caught up with my backlog, and I'm hoping that we can get some regular podcasting sessions going again now.
Yeah.
So what we decided this time was we had a little chat before the meeting, and we've come up with a couple of subjects to talk about. Shall I dive in with my first subject?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is interpreters at court, which may seem like a very mundane, boring thing, but the issue is not whether you can have interpreters at court, but what happens if somebody turns up at court who is a defendant in a possession case, say, and they only speak in broken English and say they can't understand what's going on, they're not represented, and it's clear that if the case was to go ahead, it would be a sort of going through the motions as far as the defendant's concerned. If you'd asked me that a while ago, I would have said, well, the court would basically do just that, because the court doesn't see it has any obligation to provide interpreters for people, and the onus is on them to get one, or to turn up with a family member or friend or somebody who can at least help, or get representation, and then their solicitor can arrange an interpreter. But the reason I've been thinking about it is because a friend of mine who's actually a landlord was in court, and this happened to him, that the defendant arrived at court claiming he couldn't understand what was going on. He was unrepresented. He sort of basically said, help, I don't know what's going on, and the judge adjourned it so that an interpreter could be provided. And that made me think, well, what happens at the next hearing if he just comes back and does the same thing again? Will the judge say, well, I meant you had to go and get an interpreter and bring one here? Or was there some onus on the court? That led me to do a bit of Googling and looking around, and I found some information here, and I will scroll forward so that you can see the government website which I found, which says get an interpreter at court or a tribunal. And it says you might be able to get an interpreter for free if you're going to court for a tribunal, going to court or a tribunal, and your interpreter will normally only be available during the hearing, and they might be able to take part in legal discussions before or after the hearing if the judge allows it. So this suggests that the court can arrange an interpreter. So the question would be, how does it happen? Let's just scroll down to the civil courts here, and it says you'll be given an interpreter if your case involves possession of property, so that's the stuff we're doing, or committal to prison. And you might still be able to get an interpreter if it doesn't, but only if the following apply. You can't afford to pay for an interpreter yourself, you don't qualify for legal aid, and you don't have family or friends who can help you, or who the judge says can act as an interpreter. So that seems quite confusing to me, because it says you'll be given an interpreter if your case involves possession. Now, that suggests they've sort of got some interpreters around the back of the court waiting to be called in, which I very much doubt. I've never seen them or heard of them. And then it says further down, ask the court for more information. Higher up, it says contact the court dealing with your case. I mean, that in itself is a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because anyone who's tried contacting a court will know that it's difficult even if you speak fluent English. You go in there, the only person you're going to speak to is a security guard. You call them, you're not going to get through to the court, you're only get through to a caller centre. But let's suppose you overcome those hurdles. Plus, you obviously need to speak English, because they don't. If say you only speak Lithuanian, you can't contact the court to arrange an interpreter because they won't know what you're talking about. But you then have the problem. Let's say you get through to them and they say, okay, yes, we'll arrange an interpreter for you. You then have to, I think you have to meet these tests here. Although, tell me what you think of this. It says you'll be given an interpreter if your case involves possession or committal. So that suggests you're entitled to one as of right. And it says you might still be able to get an interpreter if your case doesn't involve those things.
If you scroll down a bit, does it have any statutory authority
No.
for these suggestions? Or are they just what the person who wrote the web page
No, it's very sparse, isn't it?
Mm.
So it seems to mean that there's I think we could conclude from this paragraph here or there that you have a non-means tested right to an interpreter if you attend a court.
Yeah.
So what a judge faced with that situation that I just outlined, where the defendant turns up and says, I can't, to a possession hearing, saying I can't speak English, the judge would have to say, well, I'm going to adjourn it and I'm going to direct that the court arranges for an interpreter who speaks your language to be present.
According to this web page, but I don't know what the authority for that is. And certainly it doesn't happen. I mean, it happened in your case.
Well, I'll have to check this, but I'm not sure if it did happen. I think the judge may have just adjourned it, because my experience of judges and county courts is that they don't really like doing anything other than giving directions for what the parties should do, or whether the court would list it. They wouldn't tend to say, I'm going to direct that a member of the court staff sorts out an interpreter for you. It's sort of a little bit alien. But that seems to be what you're entitled to ask for. So presumably if you were on the duty rota and somebody turned up for a possession hearing who was unable to speak English, you could ask for an adjournment and ask the judge to...
of this website.
Well, it is the government website. I mean, it's not...
Yeah, but the claim forms on the government website still have the old statement of truth attached, already very recently. And that's
I agree with you. It could be that a judge would rightly say to you, this part of the website was clearly written by somebody who wasn't being properly supervised because they don't understand the way the courts work, and I'm not going to do that. But then you might have grounds for an appeal if a possession order was made. Because you'd say the judge failed to arrange an interpreter, and the court's government website clearly says that. And although it's not sort of very good authority, it's still a form of authority, isn't it? But even the other thing that's a bit weird for anyone who isn't facing a possession claim or a committal is you've got this criteria here, which seems to be sort of contradictory, that you're going to be a very narrow sort of Venn diagram of somebody who can't afford to pay for an interpreter themselves, but they have to be unable to afford an interpreter and they don't qualify for legal aid. That would presumably be where their case is out of scope if they were in the small claims court arguing about a washing machine. Maybe the court could give them an interpreter if they were unable to afford an interpreter, and presumably if they're on their own, the judge isn't going to sort of have any investigative powers to determine whether there are family members available. So unless they happen to be there, that would seem to be the case. It's confusing, isn't it?
I'm not sure how much faith I have in this particular webpage.
No, I don't either, but it's definitely what should happen, in the sense that anyone facing a possession, and certainly a committal, should have assistance if they can't speak English, just as they should if they're in a wheelchair and they can't get up the steps to the court. But that's my subject for the day. Maybe anybody who's listening to this or watching this and has any thoughts, that would be really good to get some comments on that. Any experiences or knowledge of the rules. Because it is a form of discrimination, isn't it? Because the people who are most likely to be unable to speak English are people from ethnic minorities who aren't English. That probably wraps that one up for now. So over to you, Daniel.
Maybe there's scope for a judicial review of the Lord Chancellor for not producing binding or even persuasive.
So do you want to move on to a subject to discuss which you'd like to raise, Daniel?
Yes. Speaking of judges, I had a very nice comment at the end of a hearing where I do court duty, and he commented that I'd helped with the case, so he thanked me for that, and he said to court duty advisors more broadly that the role we perform critical to the administration of justice, and that it's very much appreciated. And that sort of comment is such a nice thing to hear, because it shows that the role is appreciated by the judiciary and the courts. And I mean, we're obviously there so that we can be of assistance to the courts, that we are helping the defendants, but we're also there to help the court in matters of its own discretion and legal aspects as well, whatever the court needs us to assist with. And to have a nice comment from a judge at the end of a slightly complex hearing, short possession list hearing, was a very positive thing to hear.
Yeah, it is nice when people say that sort of thing. How's your can we speak about your guide to
it's coming along. I need to do a bit more work on it this weekend. But it's been useful as well. So I've been using it on my court duty, and it was actually by using it and by being able to sort of quote some relevant authorities that was one of the things that led the judge in that case to hold me back afterwards and thank me. So it's coming along well, and it does need more work, but it'll be there soon.
Great. We should when you get to a stage where even a part of it is sort of ready to see, we maybe have a special edition podcast to talk about it.
Oh yeah, okay.
And I still hope maybe one day, once we get to that far, we could then maybe, if we're lucky, we could maybe try and get Simon Mullings to come on the show and talk to us about his excellent book and how your book might I call it a book, but it's a guide, really, isn't it? I mean, it might be an e-book, but you're planning to publish it as a book.
Yes.
So how yours might complement his.
With Law Brief Publishing, they very kindly agreed to publish it. And I'm hoping to have a first draft ready by the end of October.
Right.
So that is maybe slightly...
Well, that's not long.
That'll be a first draft, and it'll take a couple more months to finalise.
Okay, so shall I move on to my second thing I want to raise?
Yeah.
Well, you've got a choice. I think probably we're a bit short of time now, but we've got two. You can. Which of these sounds more interesting? I've got a subject header called Hunt for the email address on the homelessness website, or so many webinars, so little time.
Email addresses.
Okay. Okay.
Think about email addresses.
So the theme here is that the best way into it is quite a few years ago. I think I either went to a meeting or I don't think it was in the days of video meetings. I think I actually went to a meeting that was held by Westminster Housing Department, and the purpose of it was to discuss a new service they were providing for homeless 16 to 18-year-olds. And they had to confess, the staff dealing with it had to confess that they were a little bit worried not to publicise it too much, because then it might lead to floodgates and lots of homeless 16 to 18-year-olds applying, which you think, well, isn't that what you're aiming to do? But it comes back to that problem of from a homeless persons unit or local authority point of view, is that they really don't want to overwhelm themselves, which they could easily do if they started being really helpful. Not that they're not helpful, but you know what I mean. It's if they didn't take a slightly sort of restrictive approach. But one of the things I've tended to find, and I'll go back to my screen here, which I think is here. I'll move this. So I've got this on here. These are the links. Now I noticed this because I was dealing with Haringey's website yesterday. Oops, and it looks like so I'm going to take us there now. And this, if you can see it all right, is the homelessness section of Haringey Council's website. Now, what you really should be able to do with the homelessness website, I think, is if you're homeless or you're helping a homeless person, you should be able to go on here and get some help. But the problem is, if they did that, it would maybe they would become overwhelmed. So what happens here is you can't find, although it looks very helpful, you can't actually see on here any way of getting in touch immediately. Let me show you. You think, oh, hang on, what about this? It says if you're at risk of becoming homeless, or you're already homeless. So let's go for or you're already homeless, because there you ought to have there ought to be a link so you can say, help, I'm homeless, can you help me? So what you get here is you get a very helpful guide to what you are, which is rough sleeping, and you get some information on what to do if you are rough sleeping. Remember, the first thing that as a housing lawyer we'd say you should do is contact the council, because they have a statutory duty to house you. So you would expect on here that it would say, if you're homeless, call this number or send an email. but you won't find it. I've gone through this, and I challenge anyone who's looking at this to see if they can find a telephone number or an email address, because I don't think you will. And it's frustrating that they give you information about other people, like outreach services. You can click on there, and you can find out about night shelters and things. I mean, generic information, but it's frustrating that it doesn't do what it should do. And I'm not just picking on Haringey here. I had a look at Lewisham's website, which is here, and they have a section. And again, anyone from Lewisham watching this or listening to this, please set me straight and tell me I'm being lazy and thick or something and I'm missing it. But I'll just allow all the cookies and things. So here on Lewisham's website, you get a helpful questionnaire to fill in if you're homeless. I haven't started doing it, but if you go there, it's not terribly great. I mean, it's just takes you to other things which don't seem to me to be getting you towards actually getting anyone helping you. But you may say, hang on a sec, Will, I saw a telephone number, which is here. Now that is really good. You think, great, they've got a free phone number, so call it. Now, I did have occasion to call that number a few months ago for an elderly client who couldn't make an online application and who couldn't get dealt with because they were still saying coronavirus stopped them being able to process people in the office. And I was holding on that number for probably about an hour, and I got to speak to somebody who asked, I think I was asked the same questions a number of times, but given various reasons why I couldn't be helped, why my client couldn't be helped, was a bit worrying. But that's a separate issue. At least Lewisham Fair Dues, they have a telephone number there, and although you may hold for a while and you may need to be pretty good with your housing law to get past the people that you speak to, there is a number there. And one more website to show you, which I looked at, is Lambeth. And somebody's gone to a lot of trouble to, somebody's designed all these nice sites, and they look really quite good. And here's one that you think, oh, contact the housing advice team. That sounds helpful, so let's do that. And you can phone for assistance at Lambeth. I haven't tried that one, to be fair to them. I'm a little bit worried that because it's just a general number, it may not even be answered if quite a lot of local authority numbers like this. I mean, nobody wants to have that number that phone on their desk. No. But look at this one. This is a bit worrying. It says you can fill in their form, and it's for people who feel they may be threatened with homelessness or need assistance to retain their housing. Notice it doesn't refer to people who are actually homeless, who may be owed a statutory duty immediately. And then it says, fill in this form here and we'll get back to you within 10 working days. Mm-hmm. If your case is urgent, we'll respond within 24 business hours. I guess that I haven't worked out what that is, but it's less than 10 working days. But I mean, that's better, but there should be an email address which you can send something to saying, or you should be able to get through to something approaching an emergency. People wouldn't really accept this if you went to the 999 services and said, I need an ambulance, and you got told we'll get back to you within 24 business hours. Or a fire brigade, or a fire engine.
I think 24 if you exclude the hour for lunch, then it becomes 12 noon on the fourth day.
Thank you very much. So it's 4 days. So that's still not very good, given that there's a statutory duty to provide assistance to people who the council have reason to believe are eligible homeless and in priority need. And it seems that these things seem to be a little bit designed towards ensuring that the council don't actually have the reason to believe it because the people can't get through. I have to say I found the same thing on GP surgeries. I don't know if you've ever done that. I can understand, I can sympathise. I haven't got examples for you here, but very there's a lot of GP surgeries that won't give email addresses, so you can't send an email to them. And I guess that's because I suppose they get bombarded with people. There's going to be it only needs a few people, but people who are obsessive about their medical condition could just spend all day bombarding. But it's a curse of modern times. And if I want to get an urgent report from a GP, I can't often find their email address, and I have to ring up and try and get it. So that's the end of that little rant. And I don't mean to be mean to those three authorities. If anyone out there knows of a good local authority that's got a genuine email address that works, which you could then send a request to, or a telephone number which somebody picks up within a reasonable time, I'd be pleased to hear it. And so please update me. And that's the end of that one. So is there anything else you'd like to talk about tonight, Daniel?
On the issue of email addresses, just briefly, there are a lot of... So the courts have gone through various stages of having different types of email address. So there's inquiries at, or you get so inquiries at the name of the court.
That's the most common one, isn't it?
Yeah, and then sometimes there's the name of the court at something, 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 and then some of them have GSI in, and some of them, have GSI in a different place in the email address. And they seem... I'm not quite sure how they've been updated over the years, but there seemed to be a lot that were valid, and then they moved on to a new type of email system, and then they moved on to a new type of email. We've got all of these various email addresses floating around. And if you look online, if you search for a particular court and type in email address of that particular court, obviously you'll get the official court and tribunal finder web page, which will have the website, which will have the email address on. But you'll also get some others as well. You'll get some other, these are the contact details of this court. And some of the details on those other pages seem to be some of the older email addresses rather than the newer ones. So there's a lot of confusion in that. And so I sometimes see people emailing courts using one of these other ones that would once have been valid and seems like it's valid. It looks like it's valid according to various websites. But I then emailed the court. I filed something at court, and I used the address from the court and tribunal finder, and it pinged back, but then it didn't seem to be processed. It did get processed in the end, but it didn't seem like it was going to be processed. And so what I was going to say was, so there is a practice direction which says that we are entitled to use the email address which is on the court and tribunal finder. So that should be considered the definitive email address. And it's just very, there's a lot of confusion about that because, if people haven't read that particular practice direction, they see all these other email addresses floating around on the internet. But in terms of which one we do use and which one we should use, always rely on the court and tribunal finder website to get
the screen where we both share. See that one. So court and tribunal finder. So this is just, and that one. So we go to that. It's this government site, yeah?
Yeah.
So I have the name, and I want to find, shall we try Wandsworth County Court?
Yeah.
Right, there it is. So, yeah, is this what you mean?
Yeah, so if you scroll down, so for online filing, there's the email address there. So it's the inquiries email address, so inquiries.wandsworth. I can't really read what it says because of the screen.
.countycourt@justice.gov.uk.
Yeah, But you're entitled to rely on that. But if you were to Google Wandsworth County Court email address, you may very well get a different response from a different website. So if you look at the court database,
This
is that the same or is that different?
I'm not sure. Sorry, I should have checked. Let's just have a look.
That's a GSI account. That's different.
There was a time a few years ago when they had GSI on there. Let's just go back.
Absolutely, but that's out of date. And
the modern one, the current one doesn't have GSI on it.
Yeah, so Practice Direction 5B entitles us to rely on the Courts and Tribunals Finder website email address when we're when we're filing documents at court. So we are entitled to rely on that, but we're not entitled to rely on that other email
No.
address. So there is a lot of confusion there because these other email addresses are not updated or sometimes.
It's a problem with the internet, isn't it? That there's stuff on there that you don't know that it's from 2001. And also, I mean, one of the problems I find is I type in homelessness law and I find an excellent video, and then as when I click on it, I find to my disappointment everyone's speaking with an American accent, and it's actually about homeless law in Ohio or something. Oh, that's a shame. But I guess one of the problems with the internet and the courts is that the infrastructure is so bad and is so underinvested in. I mean, I spoke to somebody at one of the county courts who told me that they don't have the technology. I said, "Why aren't you emailing orders out? Why do I still get these hard copies sent?" And they said, "We haven't got the technology to email things from our computer system. If we were to email it, we have to print it out and then attach it to an email in some other way." I mean, it sounded ghastly. So they said it's quicker just to print the things out and send them. Have you noticed that? You tend to get court orders sent hard copies, but not.
Yeah.
So I think they need to have a new. I dare not suggest a new case management system for them, because I think the magistrates' courts have got something which has led to staff going on strike. They've gone on strike over their case management system. So maybe it's better to stick with the devil you know. So I think that's probably it for tonight, because it's. So hopefully we'll get another conversation going in another week or two.
Yes.
And I'll speak to you soon. Enjoy the rest of because actually for anyone watching this, we're recording this on a Friday night. So if I say have a nice weekend, that's because it's the beginning of the weekend. And I'll speak to you soon. And goodbye. If anyone's listened to the whole of this, I hope it was interesting. I mean, it was there was a bit more substance issues that we talked about, but I think it's the end of quite a long week for both of us. And I think I've been watching videos from people who make videos, and they say if you look back at my early videos, they are so bad. There was one woman who said that she had a background in her video that she was using a shower curtain, and she said it made her cringe now that she's, 3 years later, she's really good at what she does. So maybe, but you have to do it, don't you? You have to learn how to walk before you can run. If people bear with us, hopefully we'll produce something better as time goes by. But thank you very much for your input, Daniel, and for your company. And speak to you soon.
Speak to you soon, Will.
Bye.
Bye-bye.